Mr. Vijay Padmanabhan, Director, Asian Development Bank from Manila and the Philippines. Ms. Christine Auclair, Project Leader, World Urban Campaign UN Habitat. And Mr. Karthik Ganeshan, Fellow and Director, Research Coordination, Council for Energy, Environment and Water. I'd also like to give a special welcome to our expert moderators for the next 2 days, starting with Dr. Uma Maheshwar Rajshekar, Chair, Urban Resilience, Global Resilience Cities Network, and part of the National Institute of Urban Affairs in Delhi. Dr. Rajeevan Krishnaswamy, IAS retired, former Senior Urban Finance Specialist from the World Bank, and Dr. Nambi Appadurai, Director of Climate Resilience Practice, World Resource Institute of India. And there are also a number of expert speakers in each of the technical sessions who are joining us from various parts of the country and the globe, and delegates from different parts, the press, and all of you, welcome. I'd like to start giving you a brief introduction about the Chamber and the Sustainable Chennai Forum, which some of you should be quite familiar with now. The Madras Chamber was established in 1836 and is the second oldest chamber in the country. We are in our 186th year of service to trade and industry. During the Chamber's 175th year, we launched the Sustainable Chennai Forum, as Saraswati said, on November 9th on World Habitat Day. The aim of this forum is to be a leading advocate on sustainable development and create a business case for sustainability, and really focus on the city, how to make Chennai an inclusive, sustainable, clean city. And in this forum, we focus on areas such as energy, water, waste management, transport, urban greening, just ways in which we can make our city a more livable and lovable city. The Chamber, through the Sustainable Chennai Forum, has been the associate partner of UN Habitat's World Urban Campaign a few years ago. The World Urban Campaign is an advocacy and partnership platform to raise awareness about positive urban change in order to achieve green, productive, safe, healthy, inclusive, and well-planned cities. The World Urban Campaign conceived an open space for exchange of ideas for urban stakeholders called the Urban Thinkers Campus. And over the last 4 years, the Chamber has been privileged to host the Urban Thinkers Campus in Chennai. Unfortunately, the last couple of years it's been virtual. Before, it used to be physical and quite energizing session in person. But these are the times where we are virtual. We had the first Urban Thinkers Campus in 2017 with the theme as Chennai as a global city. As a theme followed by a roadmap to zero waste in Chennai in 2018 and making Chennai water positive in 2019, making Chennai a climate smart city in 2020. The recommendations and suggestions that have arisen in these different conferences have been shared with the government for necessary action and well appreciated by the Tamil Nadu bureaucracy. The World Urban Campaign is to go green in 2021 and orient all activities and communication around climate action. So the topic that we have chosen this year is City Climate Action, Building a Resilient Chennai. The conference, as I mentioned, will be spread over the next 2 days, 9th and 10th November. It also coincides with our 10th anniversary of the Sustainable Chennai Forum. We cannot have a better timing for this, as Saraswati said, as we are timed along with COP26. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC's working group report on physical science basis of the 6th assessment released on August 2021 said that it took only 120 years for humans to alter the planet's climate, the post-industrial age. The planet that we live in right now is hardly recognizable or comparable to what used to be there 150 years ago. And the IPCC's report is called the most extensive warning on risks about rising global temperatures. The report says that the impact of a 1.5 degree Celsius increase in temperature will disproportionately affect disadvantaged and vulnerable populations through food insecurity, higher food prices, income losses, lost livelihood opportunities. adverse health impacts, and population displacement. India stands to be amongst the worst affected if this happens, given our huge population and the levels of inequality and poverty in our country. As a nation, India is keen to counter the adverse effects of climate change. The Honorable Prime Minister recently in the COP26 said that from now to 2030, India will reduce its total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons. By 2030, India will reduce the carbon intensity of its economy by 45%. And he has also pledged that we'll achieve the net zero target by 2070. Tamil Nadu is one of the more progressive and industrialized states in the country, and we cannot escape climate change with problems related to coastal erosion, depleting water resources, severe weather events such as what we're having right now, rising temperatures manifesting more recently. The recent floods, drought, cyclone, pandemic, and even this week's heavy rains goes to prove the vulnerability of the state and the city and the need for climate proofing ourselves to make ourselves more resilient. The government has prepared a report to revise the State Action Plan on Climate Change. The Tamil Nadu State Action Plan on Climate Change, or TNSA-PCC 2.0, has been prepared with state-specific impacts and vulnerabilities we understand. The government made this a priority area, allocating about 500 crores towards the climate change mission. And there are 7 prioritized sectors highlighted in this action plan, such as sustainable agriculture, water resources, forest and biodiversity, coastal area management, and strategic knowledge for climate change, enhanced energy efficiency and the solar mission, and sustainable habitat. It's clear that continuous and consistent efforts are required to build the capacity of the community as well as existing institutions to enhance our resilience. Our technical sessions in this conference include policy and planning for a resilient Chennai, critical physical infrastructure for building resilience, and strengthening social infrastructure for resilience. We have experts from different spheres sharing their knowledge with us. As we have done in previous years, we will share the conference proceedings with the government and collaborate with them to bring an effective climate city action plan to build on a resilient Chennai. With these opening remarks, let me once again welcome all of you for this knowledge-packed 2-day session and look forward to your learning from this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As he said, the Urban Thinkers Campus, we have been organizing with the collaboration of UN Habitat under their World Urban Campus and under their theme, The City We Need. The Madras Chamber, we are trying to collectively work for the Chennai we need. And we are extremely grateful to Christine Eckler for her unstinting support. Whenever we wanted her, she had been there. And today she's speaking from Nairobi. And maybe with such a short notice, I have been pushing her, she should come. And even last year, she was there. So that shows the interest and keenness. And maybe I should very briefly introduce her, but I would reserve an interesting comment about her after I give a formal introduction. She has 25 years at the international national levels in urban issues, urban policy analysis, partnership building, private sector partnerships, urban monitoring indicators, housing sector analysis, and capacity building. She has numerous publications in international journals to her credit, and she's currently the leading the advocacy campaign at UN Habitat, Human Settlement Program, and the project leader at the World Urban Campaign. What would be more interesting, maybe we have a connect of all the inaugural plenary speakers here today. She had done her PhD in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, and she had spent quite a lot of years in Tamil Nadu. And her PhD, if I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, Christine, is on the housing sector and private sector participation, if I'm right. So probably she's not going to speak from a 20,000 feet high. She knows the ground realities. So I would now invite her to give her comments. Ms. Christine.
Thank you, Sarasvati, for this very warm welcome. And thank you, Mr. Srivats, for inviting me. I feel very honored to join you today in this campus on city climate action, building a resilient Chennai. And of course, I'd like to congratulate the Madras Chamber for organizing this event and to be so active in the front of climate action. This campus is part of a dedicated 2021 series for the year on climate action that started actually in February this year on the lead to COP26. So you come at a very important time now because we are in the middle of the COP. And as you rightly said, this is an initiative of the World Urban Campaign, and that is a platform of 180 partners coming together to promote the urban agenda. So this also is part of the Habitat Climate Action for Cities campaign that is meant to give a voice to all those who are engaged in climate action around the world and to put cities at the center, because we believe that cities are accelerators. Since 2015, we have done about 170 Urban Thinkers Campus, engaging more than 50,000 participants worldwide. So it's a major success, and this format is very good. And I'm very happy that Madras Chamber is taking a very active part in that process. So this series has the following objective. Number one, to present current climate actions on the ground in different contexts, analyze good practice, solutions in different domains of action, namely nature for cities, resilience for cities, adaptation for cities, low carbon for cities, and from there extract lessons from the crisis and make recommendations for building better cities. So the recommendation will be incorporated in a report that we will share widely and will serve as advice to cities and community leaders and to governments, and as well as Habitat, for us to work on climate action in the future. So as we said before, we are in the second week of the COP. It's a very critical COP to gather the maximum commitment to limit the warming increase to 1.5 degrees by 2050. And it's a very critical and challenging moment for all of us. Our executive director is currently in Glasgow with a team, and we are in the middle of the negotiations. And countries now are basically figuring out how they're going to slow the global warming. And we're very happy to see that India has made a huge pledge. India said it would, by 2030, reduce carbon emission by 1 billion tons and would reach net zero emission, as you said before, by 2070. So since it is the third largest emitter in the world, it's a lot. Practically, it means that India is going to phase out coal, switch to electric vehicles, decarbonize polluting industries, creating forests to absorb carbon dioxide, installing more solar plants. And I believe India will be in the forefront, ready for technology, ready for change, and it will be a great leader in that respect. Yeah, and I'm sure Tamil Nadu is also very advanced, as you pointed. And cities, of course, are part of the game, though the Paris Agreement itself is only the commitment of national government. But Chennai is highly committed to climate. You even demonstrate your commitment and of course that are typically problem of coastal cities at low level. And like many cities, you are also facing multiple risks with climate change, sea level rise, tropical cyclone, heat waves. And in that context, it is essential to enhance community resilience as prescribed in the Sendai framework of the United Nations to build a resilient Chennai. So we're very proud to have you as a proactive city in the World Urban Campaign. And we look forward to your action, your recommendation, and to learn from them and to share with the other partners of the World Bank campaign. So I'd like to thank you in advance for this successful debates, deliberation, and to get your results and action soon. So thank you, and over to you, Sarasvati. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Christine. Hoping to see you in person, at least in 2022. Probably we could have more.
I'd love that. I'd love that. Thank you.
We would welcome you. However, I should say that since 2017, we have been having this. And one great benefit we find as a chamber by bringing this World Urban Campaign to Chennai is the cross-learning we have. We are connected, thanks to the UN Habitat, with so many partners sharing the same vision agenda world over. And there had been a lot of cross-learnings. Thanks a lot, Ms. Christine, for that. I would probably, we would have in the recent past or in the recent times, we were hearing a lot about the vulnerability index that had been published by the Council for Water, Energy and Environment, and which ranked the Tamil Nadu in the 7th place, if I'm right, in the vulnerability index. And I understand this is the first time such a district level index has been computed. And we are curious to know how this worked and what are the elements and probably what need to be done to fight the vulnerability. We are thankful to have Mr. Karthik Ganesan with us here today, representing the Council for Energy, Environment and Water. And he's the fellow and director of research of the organization. And as I said at the beginning, it's just a coincidence. Everybody seemed to have some Chennai connection. So as Karthik too, though he's now speaking from Delhi, he sits at Delhi now. And he's an engineer by training. As director, he has a bird's eye view of the CEW's ongoing and planned research work, including the current one we have been talking about. And he ensures cross-team coherence for their research direction and imperatives. He has played a pivotal role in conceptualizing and executing some of the researchers of the council. He holds a master's degree in public policy from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. He also holds an undergraduate degree in civil engineering and an MTech in infrastructure engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, of course, Madras. Over to you, Karthik.
Thank you, Ms. Saraswati, for having me over. Incidentally, this request was actually made to my colleague, Dr. Arunava Ghosh, who couldn't join us. He's currently away at the Glasgow negotiations, and actively contributing there. And also he asked me, would you like to do this because this is about your hometown? And I readily jumped at it, though I'm not the lead in the study that Ms. Saraswati spoke about. And I think, we have many eminent panelists over the course of the next 2 days who will be speaking in depth about, of course, what climate resilience is all about. I just wanted to sort of initially reflect on my experience, growing up in Chennai and the way I've seen some of the developments happen and trying to sort of superimpose what I've learned along the way, as a practitioner in the sustainable development space. And I remember, in recent memory, my parents have been in Chennai now for the last 2.5 decades. And the worst droughts that came to Chennai in my mind, are the ones that happened in the turn of the century. 99, 2000, 2001, around that time, there was about 3-year long drought period. And I remember at that time, I was in 12th standard, I had to literally, lug, cans of water, every day from, that was pumped at the government's, those dispensers that you have hand pumps, go up 3 floors in the, the housing board flat that we used to live in. And of course, from there, we've come a long way, right? We've come a long way in that, we don't have to pump water and, take it up anymore. Now the government has made electricity so cheap, right? Because, of the distortion in pricing that we have, that pretty much everybody is able to have their own bore well, and they're able to sort of, access groundwater, at their fingertips. Courtesy also, of course, of I would say a visionary practice that was set up in Chennai of rainwater harvesting, which was made mandatory. Perhaps in a bit hasty manner they implemented it, but nevertheless 2003 was a bit of a watershed moment there. Which said new builds to all have rainwater harvesting, and I think 2006 was the timeline for existing stock of buildings to have their RWH in place. And I remember Mr. Shekhar Raghavan, who runs the Rain Center, friend of my father's, friend of my a father of my friends actually. And, he would tell me, how crucial that implementation was. And I've constantly been tracking how the water table has been changing in Chennai. And, lo and behold, after all of that, 2019, and we come to, this Cape Town moment in Chennai, right? Where, there's day zero, right? And I was talking to my mother about it, and, and she said, meaning, all of this keeps happening, right? When you were 3 years old, right? I had you on my hips, and we used to run across the road, where there was not even a common, like a private borewell. There was a government one. We'd have to go stand in line there. We used to lug it. We did it when you were in college, and we'll probably do a different solution going forward, and I think that kind of sums up to me, right, the approach that cities like Chennai and perhaps cities around the country have to adapting to the issues of, whether it's climate change or whether it's, man-made sort of disasters, right, around the country. In that, I think we're all very good at coping. At least we think we're very good at coping. We come up with mechanisms that allow us to cope, right? It might be in the short run, as I said, storing water in, in these blue buckets, blue carboys that we used to have, or, it's about building sumps and individual storage tanks, right? Or eventually about relying on, water being pumped away from far. But I think what we fail to realize is the gravity that climate change actually brings to this entire thing, right? Wherein I don't think we realize the pace at which things have changed, that we keep assuming that, coping alone will sort of, get us past the finishing line. And that is perhaps the biggest tragedy. And unfortunately, many things that we have done along the way don't seem to have helped us as well. Specifically, as I said, in the case of groundwater, even though we have fantastic rainwater harvesting systems in the city, right? Almost negligibly priced electricity means that nobody cares about, for instance, the water overflowing from their overhead tanks when it's actually filling up. I mean, it's a constant sight across Chennai, right? And unfortunately, the billing for those also falls under this common area connection, which is again, given this 50-unit subsidy that the government gives, government just doesn't want to put them, under the slab of the residents. We've gone ahead and petitioned to, Tangentco a couple of times, but unfortunately, there are also other drivers, resulting in that, populist play, persisting. So clearly, there are, some ready solutions that are at hand to regulate, for instance, the use of water and to make the city a little bit more water secure. But those are not being used. And instead, we are going with sort of, technology-driven solutions. There is a, I think there's a desalination plant coming up at Nemili. In fact, there is, I think, an operational unit at Nemili even right now, right? And there is probably a talk of expanding it. And yet, so this brings us to the point that you talked about, Ms. Saraswati, which is, Chennai, Tamil Nadu incidentally ranks 12th among the most sort of vulnerable states in the country, as per the study that we came out with. So it's called the Climate Vulnerability Index, and as you know, it's very important from a fiduciary perspective. Obviously going forward, we know that climate change is going to have significant impacts on sort of like the financial ecosystem of the country, because a lot of investments are going to be subject to climate risk, and as a result, you need to have an understanding of what you're getting into. And in fact, that was one of the main reasons, because as a country with increasing infrastructure, we wanted to sort of put it out there that these are the areas where we think there are significant risks to infrastructure and to livelihoods and to lives. And as a result, we'll have to think about how we go in there and how we incentivize the market to then create the appropriate mechanisms to address climate change there. That's the reason we came out with this. And we found that, across the country, more than 3/4 of the districts are really, extremely vulnerable to, climate change in different forms. I mean, this could be a combination of both. I mean, a combination of floods, of cyclones, of droughts, and all of them sort of happening, in a combination, right? So you could have flood and drought happening, flood and cyclones happening, droughts and cyclone happening, flood, drought, and cyclones happening. And incidentally, Chennai, right, district ranks as the most vulnerable among the districts of Tamil Nadu, and primarily because it is actually vulnerable to floods, droughts, and cyclones. And one of the reasons why, again, this drought actually is a sort of like a progenitor, in the cyclogenesis process, and drought-like conditions actually, trigger cyclogenesis, right? And as a result of which, what happens is, you experience prolonged periods of drought, and as a result, you end up sort of, also inviting extreme events by way of, high rainfall and cyclones, which you're not able to tap, primarily because of the way the urban landscape has been changing over the many years. And then you're left with a situation where, you're in this sort of vicious cycle where there is, nearly 1,400 mm of water that Chennai gets on an annual basis, but you're not able to tap it effectively to make do for the population, right? In 2019, as I was saying, and Mr. Srivath, you mentioned, about the temperature rise. In fact, the Tamil Nadu State Action Plan for Climate Change actually acknowledges a 3.1 C rise in temperature by 2100, right? In the situation that we actually, this is, I think, as per the 2010 estimates of where the country was headed, and the reduction in rainfall by 9%. So it's not like the Tamil Nadu government does not understand where the city of Chennai and the state of Tamil Nadu are actually headed. It's already internalized in the existing action plan for climate change. So given that, I think, the good part, as Christine said, was that, Tamil Nadu has been a very progressive state in that it wants to tackle it. I mean, in this particular government has made all the right noises to suggest that, they want to address this issue head on and not sort of, greenwash it, which is very heartening to actually hear. But finally, I think what we really need is, we need this, in an increasingly climate risk landscape, high volatility landscape. Hyperlocal planning is absolutely essential. I mean, and what is currently happening, which is, we've seen the situation arise, and believe it or not, I actually have a colleague whose grandparents, raised their entire new construct building by about 6 feet, right? Since the last floods that happened in 2015, they ended up also buying a car that actually has a higher wheelbase, primarily because they're afraid of flooding that will continue to happen in the city. So obviously, people seem to be preparing in many different ways, but at the end of the day, they also have a house in Velachery, which everybody knows is prone to flooding. So, that, you're sort of getting into those kinds of areas, and that's what we need to avoid by, planning the city well in advance and ensuring that, that we're not encroaching upon spaces. And this is a common topic, I think, that's come across different cities, whether it's Bangalore, right, which is dubbed the city of lakes, and Chennai, I guess, is the city of tanks, not so much lakes. It's sort of, distributed all across the city. But unfortunately, we seem to have, sort of gone ahead and encroach all of them, whether it's Pallikaranai Marsh, right, which is a full-fledged lake, but today, it's down to about maybe 30% of its original size. And focus on rehabilitating, restoring, and reintegrating, right, natural ecosystems as part of the development process. Chennai has a wealth of it, has a surfeit of it. Unfortunately, we seem to have lost it along the way. And we have to integrate climate risk profiling along with the infrastructure planning process. This is very, very crucial. I mean, while many cities seem to be doing the talk in terms of, we're going to go the EV route, we're going to phase out, all of this. I think, what is most important from the Chennai perspective is to ensure that infrastructure planning increases the adaptive capacity of the state, of the city. So the three measures that we really sort of looked into in our own research was the overall level of, the exposure, sensitivity, and the adaptive capacity. So of course, exposure is governed by climate change and broader doings. There's very little that we can actually do to reduce it. What we can do is to sort of, really change the way, how sensitive we are to some of these and improve our adaptive capacity to it. And finally, climate risk, adaptation financing is really necessary to ensure that, these hotspots that we identify in all these cities actually end up getting their due in terms of, how well they're able to address, issues going forward. And finally, I want to sort of leave with one thing. Chennai does not figure in, for instance, the National Clean Air Plan, which is, the 122 non-attainment cities. I find that very strange. It's not, while Chennai is a coastal city, which by and large, you would not associate with poor air quality. One of the things which is, I think, a crisis which is currently there, you don't have to wait for 20 years for it to happen, is the deteriorating air quality in Chennai. And I think the way we think about our energy system and our infrastructure overall must definitely address this quality, the issue of deteriorating air quality, primarily because the developments that are being signaled, whether it's, for instance, the expansion of the Ennore thermal power plant, or the way, for instance, ash is handled in the North Chennai thermal power plant area, certainly means that, in about 10 years' time, it is very likely to be in the same boat as many of the other cities of the Indo-Gangetic Plain, where pollution is rampant. While it's not a problem today, I think one of the things that makes the city livable or has made it livable is the sort of more salubrious air, that the city has had, which is definitely under risk. And I hope that, as part of these deliberations, there will also be some focus in looking at how we can improve the air quality also in the city, despite not being recognized under a named scheme like the National Clean Air Plan. I will leave it at this. As I said, I'm more than happy to sort of interact with anybody who has any questions on the methodology associated with the Climate Vulnerability Index study. It's also available for everybody to see on our website, of course. And my colleagues who actually led the study will be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck to the rest of the session as well. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Karthik. In fact, he was worried whether we will go ahead with the program. So he was checking up with me whether there is any change because of the rains and the pictures presented. So I said, thankfully it is virtual in a way, so we will still go ahead. Of course, we have the issue of connectivity and all, but still we know, as you say, probably that is the resilience, natural resilience we have all built, the coping capacity. The note what you say, probably, yes, we will bring those points under the discussion. In fact, Mr. Uma Maheshwar and Rajshekhar is here, NAUA. So we have been discussing with them about setting up a Chennai Urban Observatory. Maybe we'll have to take that to the level. One or two areas we wanted to identify. We were rightly thinking about water and air. So probably we will see what needs to be done. Maybe we will have to take that discussion to the next level. Thank you so very much again, Mr. Karthik, for joining with us. And if would be available for some of the subsequent sessions, we could also have a little more interaction, maybe the technical session, if you are available. Thanks a lot. So we will, unfortunately, Mr. Hitesh Kumar Matwana, the Principal Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, may not be able to make it. They were doubtful. He's still in a discussion with the Chief Secretary, and we could understand they are all in a firefighting thing because of the rains. So anyway, we will be happy to hear Mr. Vijay Padmanabhan. You know, Tamil Nadu and Asian Development Bank has a long and strong connect. And I read somewhere that recently they have approved, EDB has approved around 150 million US dollars for a sustainable housing project for the urban poor in Tamil Nadu. So that is the kind of strong connect. And Mr. Vijay Padmanabhan, again, as I said in the beginning, though he mentioned about Bangalore, he's from Coimbatore, as I understood. Again, he's from Tamil Nadu, and currently he is the Director of Asian Development Bank and sitting at Philippines. He's now addressing from Philippines. So we will be happy to have your thoughts, Mr. Vijay. As I said for Karthik or Christine, you know the ground realities. You have also been following up what's happening here. And so we would be very happy to hear from you. And as I said, we would continue to work with you in the times to come. Over to you. And let me briefly introduce him before I invite him to speak. He's an engineer, urban planner, and he's the operations director for urban development and water in the ADB's Southeast Asia region, and manages 4 billion US dollar operations currently. He has more than 24 years of professional experience. He has led multi-sector teams in designing and delivering large and complex projects in urban development, water and sanitation across several countries in the Asia Pacific region. His experience also includes work on enterprise resource planning for urban local bodies, structuring and financially closing private sector projects and infrastructure bonds in the water and sanitation sector, and structuring and implementing emergency and disaster assistance projects, what we are currently discussing. I was given to understand, we had a chat before the session a few days back. I also understood that he was actively involved when he was here in the Coimbatore urban planning to an extent. Mr. Vijay.
Thank you, Ms. Swati. Thanks for the introduction, and good evening to everyone. And it's a pretty much of an honor to be here back in Chennai. I started my work in Chennai in 1996, and I'm hoping that some of my mentors are on this call. And I'm sure I'll be looking forward to Dr. Rajivan's session tomorrow. And he's been a very important person in our grooming way back. I think we did just now hear from Karthik that he was lugging around bottles of water in 2001, 2002. But fortunately, at that time, we were on a street in Chennai where we didn't have that kind of a problem. But I can just imagine what we were going through in 2001, 2002 when I was still working in Chennai. So what I'll do today is I've got a short presentation, and it's more for all of us to just look at what's happening across different parts of the world. And I'll just share with you the work that we're doing in Southeast Asia, covering the countries of Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and also Cambodia. Essentially, this is just to get a flavor of how people are coping with different situations, how people are incorporating nature into their overall planning and design, and also trying to connect with the theme of the conference that we have here, essentially trying to look at the policy planning frameworks. I understand that we'll be looking at the physical infrastructure and also into how we're looking at addressing social issues. So maybe I'll just touch upon these points for all of you, and it's more of a, just to take it back and mull over it when you're having your discussions the next couple of days. So let me share with you my screen. I hope you could see my screen. If somebody can just give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, yes,
Okay,
we are
Thanks.
able to see.
Okay. Right. So just to start off with, we do know that cities continue to become more and more important, and I'm sure all of you have seen this on many reports. 60% of the world's global population will be residing in Asia Pacific, and about 55% will be in urban settlements. Of course, this number is going to continue to spike. It's not going to remain the same as we start seeing what we call as climate migration. The World Bank's recent report states that many people are actually moving due to impact of climate change in the spaces that they stay in. Another slide I thought I'll present here is from the Financial Times. This has, of course, come out as part of COP26. 2020, we saw about 29 million people living in these what we call as black spots. By 2070, we're looking at about 3 billion people living in these black spots. And essentially, most of India is kind of covered by this kind of heat situation that we're going to be experiencing. And it's not just about the heat alone. And of course, everyone's talking about mitigation. But one area that ADB is specifically focusing is on adaptation. And recently at COP26, our president also announced that we will be more ambitious with our adaptation finance targets. And I guess that's an area that we are kind of constantly looking out to try and see how we can improve on them. So maybe just to break this kind of presentation or narrative into 4 parts. One of the main objectives that we're trying to look at when we prepare our programs is looking at sustainable development. And essentially, the underlying point there is the policy and planning framework that's established. It's every city has its own approaches. Of course, they have different conditions under which they work, but also looking at larger regional or nationwide policy frameworks. I mean, in India, of course, urban development, water is typically a state subject, but it's not the case in many other countries. So it depends. Sometimes it's a national framework that comes into play. So just to give you a quick feel for what we do in Southeast Asia, we are actually developing some sort of a framework on how we look at sustainability and testing, sustainable solutions. And this almost resonates with the sessions that we have following through. We're looking at 4 dimensions, essentially looking at the built, human, natural, and social capital, and how this kind of plays out across different living spaces and cities in a sense. We address about 9 goals of these different 4 capitals, and then we develop around 25 solutions. And what we've done is we've tested these through what we call as the PESTLE framework. And this is also drawing from what the World Economic Forum has been actually also kind of distributing across, talking about how we look at political impact on solutions, the economy, social, technology, looking at legal issues, and looking at the environment. So every solution is really tested for these specific activities. And in Southeast Asia, we are trying to adopt this framework across different cities so that we can actually test them out and then try and develop more solutions for different cities. And we're kind of working around 20 to 25 cities right now where we have embedded most of our programs looking at adaptation itself. We've all been practicing resilience planning. So as a part of our normal process, we look at urban resilience planning, bringing in, of course, different stakeholders across the city, whether they are players in the government or even we look at CSOs, NGOs also working closely with us in terms of planning and design. What we've also noticed now very recently, obviously due to COVID, and I guess this has been happening across the space, is how we've been able to use data and how we've been able to work with a lot of academia and research organizations. In the city of Makassar in Indonesia, we've been working with the Future Cities Lab in Singapore. This is part of ET at Zurich. And we've been helping the city look at the spread of COVID, and a lot of data which has been captured over the past through either open source forum or through mobile technology, we've been able to actually work with them. And this has actually allowed us, because there's been a strong relationship with academia. And of course, in Chennai, we do have very strong academia, and that's an area that we will obviously capitalize on, but there are also international institutions that have provided a lot of support to various cities across Southeast Asia. Another space that we've been looking at and where we've developed internally ADB's own systems is working through open source open street maps and working with open source networks, where we were looking at how we can help the Cambodian government based around the Tonle Sap Basin, which is quite a large wetland, where we're looking at unexploded ordinances and how we have used that, staying away from the field, but how we've used it to help the government to understand how we can lay its infrastructure. So the point here is that sometimes, there's a lot of data available, but we've never used it as well as we've used it now during the COVID period, where we've not been able to go to the field, and we've really been able to support governments by the power of data. And that's something that we're really pushing our governments to try and use more and more so that it benefits them in the planning space. Just to get into the 4 areas that we talked about in terms of natural, built, human, and social capital. One area that we're looking at in terms of natural capital is looking at biodiversity conservation. ADB started recently what is called as the Regional Flyway Initiative, where we are looking at migratory birds and what pathways they take, and how we can support a number of conventions in trying to preserve that particular migratory patterns and support. So that's something that we've announced recently also at the COP. But in terms of cities itself, we're looking at water sensitive urban design, and in the city of Ho Chi Minh, our teams are actually working on designing large landscapes where we're kind of incorporating water into our urban design itself. So basically, in terms of the work that we're doing there right now in Ho Chi Minh, we have looked at one of the largest cultural parks, and this is about a $600 million project which looks at wastewater management and drainage, but essentially working closely with the city, what we call as the People's Provincial Committee, to try and understand how they can actually incorporate these designs into their overall planning framework. Now, this is an area which is quite difficult, as most of you would know. One is, of course, it's about land, capturing the value of land there. And the second is also to get governments to move away from pure concrete, or what we would call as a gray infrastructure, to blend in green. And looking at options of bioengineering, and also options of using different species in terms of how they could kind of arrest the flow of water or floods, or also in many cases look at treatment. So basically a rendering below shows how we're using mangrove species there to look at some form of flow arresting, but also contributing towards the treatment. And here, what we've done is we've worked closely with UK DFID, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Switzerland SECO on the Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund, which is actually financing quite a significant portion of the design, and also contributes towards what we call as investment grants. So grant facilities that allow for adaptation measures to be factored into our infrastructure. And this again is a way of actually beginning to promote more of use of nature-based solutions in our design. The second area is basically looking at built capital, and I guess most of us in Chennai would recognize that the value of land there also is kind of contingent on what we're looking at in terms of the quality of services available in that space. So flood risk management is a particular area that ADB and many city governments in Southeast Asia are working on. And this is pretty important given the geography in which we are located, and the constant impact that we have due to cyclones and natural disasters. And of course, to overlay on top of that is urban development and looking at built up spaces in natural water receptacles. This obviously creates the kind of flood environment that all of us are typically faced with. And this is an area that we're working closely with the governments on. The city of Baguio obviously is not in a coastal area. It's one of the hill stations in the country of Philippines. But it's a particular city that we've been working quite closely with, to trying to look at how we capture land value and the impact of flood essentially on assets, on houses, We're also looking at the impact of flood on people, looking at time series information, and therefore looking at resilient designs. Now, what we are again working on in terms of financial instruments with the government, and Philippines has actually borrowed a pretty significant loan on contingent disaster financing, which is essentially borrowing advance funding to be ready to address disasters when they happen. And this is something that's building into also disaster risk insurance. So a lot of our work that we're doing right now is looking at disaster risk insurance and how we kind of go through the whole cycle of understanding what we just heard on exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. All these are being really built into designing systems that will actually start valuing property, and more specifically for governments to try and understand what is the financing that's required to look at rebuilding once disasters occur. So here, the work that we're doing again with the government of Australia, the DFAT, and is being designed using the ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund. So the work that's focusing on resilience and also looking at disaster risk insurance. Then we had the fourth item, which was basically looking at social capital. And the reason here we're looking at is on strengthening institutions. So obviously, what we're trying to do as ADB is to kind of make the transformation from, dependency on grants or concessional assistance to graduating them out of complete assistance or being able to access capital markets in some way. Governance and finance, therefore, plays a very critical role. So a space that all of us might want to explore in the next couple of days is essentially looking at how we look at improved financial management in city governments and water utilities or public utilities. The city of Hue, we've worked with them pretty closely. This is in Vietnam, and it was a part of a program where ADB worked with around 14 to 15 water utilities since 2010. It was $1 billion investment that we made in, and we worked closely on the infrastructure, but also we worked on governance and finance. Again, no other time that we were stressed the most was basically during COVID. And because they had improved governance and finance systems, we looked at financial management, and purely because of their digitization efforts, they were able to actually ensure that the revenues were being collected pretty regularly, despite the situation where they could not access most of the houses due to inability of basically meeting up with people and the restrictions laid down due to COVID. Again, in Vietnam, ADB has been able to work closely with one of the water utilities to get them to access capital markets and ADB's non-sovereign lending. So without sovereign guarantees, we have been able to lend. In fact, of course, if Dr. Rajivan's on the call, he would remember that way back in 2001, 2002, we had done the takeout finance through TNUDF, where we used the Development Credit Authority of USAID to actually look at financing of multiple loans, which we also did in Bangalore as a part of the infrastructure bonds in 2003. So these are opportunities where we're building on creditworthiness of utilities. So the social capital then touches upon the creditworthiness and governance and finance. And just closing out, I guess the most important part is looking at improved human capital. And as a part of a RISE project in Indonesia, we're working in the city of Makassar and also in Suva, the capital of Fiji, where we are looking at revitalizing informal settlements and their environment. This is a part of our work that we're doing with Monash University in Australia. So just quickly to touch upon Makassar and closing out. Essentially, we're working with informal settlements that are based in low-lying areas and are constantly affected through floods. And here the work really touches upon not just improving their environment, but also trying to look at what is the impact of improved sanitation on the cognitive skills of children and how sanitation actually impacts the health and their ability to actually perform well as they kind of develop and grow. So this is a few pilots that we're working on, and this is in close collaboration with the Wellcome Trust in UK, one of the largest contributors to research in the medical space. And that's an area that we're looking at in terms of development impact and the ability to scale up this entire concept. Of course, again, here there's a lot of community-based consultation and infrastructure co-design, and a lot of women, children are engaged. And I guess that's the same process that one would follow when we are looking at improving the human capital in cities. So in conclusion, I just thought I'll leave you this slide over here. We very often talk about climate mitigation, but I guess in many senses, we kind of don't lay stress on biodiversity and nature conservation. We're also seeing that oceans are basically the carbon sinks, and we're working a lot on marine protection. And last but not the least, the water conservation becomes pretty critical, especially when we're looking at all the heat impacts. But also when we look at cooling, water being used for cooling even data sites, which actually kind of house a lot of the cloud-based systems that we are all dependent today, and probably also something that we're dependent on this kind of a virtual setup. So I guess these are the areas that ADB is focused on over the next 10 years, specifically looking at adaptation and biodiversity conservation. So with that, I would like to thank you again and wish you all a pretty productive forum in the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vijay Padmanabhan. If you and Karthik do not mind, can we take one or two questions if there are some?
Sure.
Now that Mr. Makwana may not be joining, any panelists or anyone wants to raise any questions? Just a couple of questions we can take now. You can post or raise your hand. Okay. Maybe they are all reserving them for the technical sessions too. Some of the thing, as you said, the green and blue infrastructure, things like that will be discussed in the technical session that followed today and tomorrow. So I request you to join whenever possible, whenever convenient for any specific sessions. Thank you so very much. So, Mr. Srivastava, yeah.
Yeah, Saraswati, I thought I would ask a question.
Oh, please. You have all the prerogative, yeah.
So my question is actually that, with climate change, while we talk about temperature rise and we talk about flooding and drought, the challenge is actually the uncertainty of it and the fact that you may have both situations. You will have situations of excess of water, you'll have situations of not enough water. So given that type of outlook, is there a new approach that is there? I'm especially looking at water conservation. So question is really about how do you conserve water? Where do you keep the extra water? And if you keep the extra water, can you store it, or is that impractical? I was just curious whether, especially a country like Philippines, which probably gets much more rain than we do, has there been any thought on that or any solutions that have come out?
Yeah, maybe I can quickly come on that. Yeah, I guess so for if you take Metro Manila, I'm sure many of us know about the water concessionaires over here. I mean, those have been in the water space. I guess they are the only two concessionaires that are probably surviving the whole private sector boom of the early 2000s or the late 1990s. Initially they've all been focusing more on the typical non-revenue water reduction and have not really focused much on, water conservation. So, rainwater harvesting is something which is very, very recent. It's not been there as a concept for long because they've never really considered that as an option of how do you look at water storage. Metro Manila depends really on just one dam for serving its entire 20 million population. So again, there's a kind of complete reliance on one water source. But they are actually developing now, looking at options of rainwater harvesting. Even water recycling is something that was not practiced. So wastewater recycling treatment. So we are now looking at what are the options there. So actually the storing is a bit of a difficult process unless and until you have certain pockets like, colonies where you can probably look at options of storing. but otherwise it's quite difficult to maintain that in low-lying areas here. So I think the question really is more on how do you reuse existing wastewater systems, or looking at options of alternative water sources. So that's something that they're still working on. So we don't have really an option here where the storage is really created for that kind of scale, other than looking at large dams. But again, dams have their own issues related with environment and social issues on resettlement in the indigenous people. So that's something that we need to work on further. Yeah, so that's basically something that concessioners are still working on.
Anything you want to add, Mr. Karthik?
I mean, again, going back to the Chennai example, I've seen, many an RWA doing the math around what will it mean in terms of reducing reliance on the metro water supply, right, if they were to go the rainwater harvesting route, and what happens in the case of recharge. They've got technical assessments done, and I've been, privy to a few of them, again, purely from a personal interest perspective. And the potential definitely is for rainwater harvesting to be done in a much more technically sound manner. And I think there are enough number of practitioners in the city who have shown, for instance, how they've even pushed back saltwater intrusion in the case of the coastal parts of Chennai itself, right? As a result of sound rainwater harvesting practices. And more importantly, in the case of cities like Bangalore and Chennai, I think rejuvenating the age-old lakes and ponds that were actually there, the step wells that are part and parcel of very much the rural landscape surrounding the core city, is I think one of the biggest challenges that our cities like in India face, right? And if they can do that successfully, and I think there are many such success stories that you see, and I think if you step away from the traditional media and you go look at the likes of the Better India, Your Story, you'll find number of these stories are just immense, right? These lake rejuvenating groups that have pretty much over the course of just one monsoon cycle, right? What was once a waste dumping yard, basically then changed to a beautiful, lake landscape. So obviously those stories are far and few in between, but they are being shown to happen very much in mainstream areas. And I think what is important is that community awareness of how those are the solutions that will actually sort of help hold them in good stead in the long run. And the challenge is really where I think that people participation is not really there. And as I said, even in RWAs, right, the participation of people in the decision making is so rare. Right? It's only a few, who are sort of, really gung-ho about a particular solution or an intervention who seem to be driving a lot of the outcomes. So I think getting people to think about some of these as intrinsic for, very much their own sustainable existence in the city is perhaps something where, groups like, everybody who's probably here, right, can do a bit more. And I think then on, the people should just take the mantle on and get it done through the private providers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just I want to check with you. I mean, we always take pride being urbanized and state, and we know urbanization and climate change has a bit of a thing. We tried alternate models like Pura and all, providing urban facilities in rural. Do you see a good model elsewhere which has balanced this to the urbanization process and in the planning, through the planning, the climate change adaptation and the urbanization process? Any good model you see with any of you?
Yeah, maybe I can just come in here quickly. The thing is, most of the developed cities that we're looking at, in terms of urban landscape, they're quite, I would say the land use, the pattern, everything is kind of been already built upon. So many a times we seem to be more retrofitting things than we're really looking at how we can address overall regional development. Now, the models which we've seen in Gujarat and the other place, we're looking at town planning schemes, where they're really planning it through and then partitioning and then looking at how they work through on properties. These are probably good models that one could look at, how we kind of use land pooling and town planning schemes in terms of development. But when it comes to core city develop, the same problem we find everywhere across, whether it's, like I said, again, if I take Southeast Asia as an example, whether we take the Philippines, Metro Manila, or we take Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi, we're still struggling with all the built up already there. So it's quite difficult to look at incorporating some of these designs on an urban developed space, but where it's a bit more greenfield, and that's what's happening in Metro Manila now, where most of the planned developments happening in the outskirts, and they're becoming independent townships where they're not looking at bringing in more people into the city center, but actually kind of dispersing. So that's one way of development that's taking place. We've also seen that happening in Jakarta and a few other of the large metros, where development's happening on the outskirts more on a planned basis. Of course, there are what one would call as large rise buildings in city centers, trying to balance out the infrastructure costs. But again, that's more to do on property values and returns there, rather than really looking at urban development, looking at addressing issues related with climate change. So that kind of a battle is always being fought with the real estate and how we look at development or planning authorities. I think Ms. Saraswati, you're on mute.
Saraswati, you're muted. Not able to hear.
Sorry. So there is a question in the chat box. Any ADBs were carried on Indian cities?
Oh yeah, ADB actually works in quite a lot of states in India. So we started off in Karnataka, I think way back in 94, 97. In fact, Tamil Nadu, we've just come in only very recently. So we've got projects that are happening in Karnataka. So coastal part, Mangalore. The first project was close to Bangalore. It was essentially looking at Mysore, Chennapatna, Ramanagaram, way back in the 90s. Then in North Karnataka, Hospet, Bellary, those areas, and then of course coastal Karnataka. So Karnataka has been a main state. Then Kerala, we had projects in the 5 major cities. So Trivandrum, Kollam, Kochi, Kozhikode, and Thrissur. So that's basically Kerala in the south. And then Madhya Pradesh has been another state where we've done a lot of work in India. And then we have work in Assam. Rajasthan has been another major state where ADB has been working. So all the 4 key tourist destinations of Jaipur, Jaisalmer, Jodhpur, and Udaipur. Well, again, Bikaner also. So 5 of them, and then lots of small towns. So yeah, I think in the last count we were talking about almost 19 states or something. So work's happening across. So unfortunately, I think Tamil Nadu, we all learned through the World Bank project. So that was what was prominent long back. But ADB has come in pretty recently.
Thank you. One question, I don't know about the chiming. We are running short of time. So why do you think the waters in Marina Beach did not flow into the sea? We are talking about the recent rains. The seashore is not visible. Why did it flow into the sea? Is a question from Dr. Madanareka. Any of you? So Vijay, you have an answer?
I don't know. Maybe I have no idea. I've kind of lost track of the geography, but I don't know whether the famous Coombe Buckingham Canal projects are still happening or not happening. Long back, we were working on that. It's been a project that's been happening for eternity. And I don't know whether all these have been actually dredged and, taken care of. Maybe that's probably one of the reasons, but yeah, it's been almost 25 plus years. So maybe Karthik is more younger than me, I guess.
I have unfortunately no view on this particular one. It's very difficult to explain why certain things are happening. But what I do see is that I'm not sure whether Mr. Srivats's observation in saying that suggesting that this time it's been better. A lot of people are saying that they're taking precautionary measures, but I'm not necessarily sure whether the rain has been intense enough for us to actually observe whether the city will hold up. But prayers and good luck with all the residents of Chennai over the next few days is all I think I will conclude by saying. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing in response to that, Karthik, is to say that when the floods took place, there were some very concerted efforts to debottleneck where the flooding took place. It still doesn't, it doesn't resolve the issues related to the fact that the areas are up to the brim and where does that water go. It doesn't take care of those issues. But localized flooding that used to take place due to topographical or lack of canals and that type of infrastructure, some of that has actually taken place, and I know some of it, close to some of our factories, that kind of work has happened and the government has taken that. So hopefully it's better, but we don't really know. Let's wish for the best.
Okay. I think I should say a big thanks to all of you. Unfortunately, my vice president is not able to join. I should say a big thanks to all of you, Ms. Kristen, Ms. Karthik Ganesan, Mr. Vijay Padmanabhan, and every one of you, every participants. We are associated with the NIUA on this particular event for the last so many years. So Mr. Maheshwaran is here to chair the next session. We also got quite a few sponsors, as you could see from the list. So thanks everyone. Maybe we will just close the inaugural plenary and then move to the technical session one. Big thanks to all of you. We have a small memento which will be sent across to you. Madhumati or Jaya, can you show it on the screen? Including to you, Mr. Vijay.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Jaya, can you show it, ma?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so just a small memento we'll send across just for you to remember this event to all of you. Let me see how to send it to Christian. I'll send it to you. Okay, thanks a lot. A big thanks to everyone again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You could stay back for the technical session if you want. I would now invite Mr. Uma Maheshwaran.
எனக்கு full ஆ தெரிஞ்சது.
Sorry. And the panelists for the first session to come to the screen. That much I can say, not to the podium, Mr. Mahesh.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr.
Dr.
Sudhi.
Lance Bandari. Mr. Dutt, Subodha Dutt. Yeah. And the Rajendran from the Greater Chennai Corporation.
Yes, hello.
Ma'am, Evangeline.
Yes. Sorry, he's joining. Okay. Okay, I think I should leave it to Mr. Rajshekhar, whom we fondly call as Mahesh, to take over the thing and take over the stage now. And welcome all of you. And in fact, as I mentioned, we were working very closely with the NIUA thanks to Mr. Uma Maheshwaran. And probably it's nice of him to have agreed to chair the session. Otherwise, he would have been physically present here last few years. He was with us this year, and I think last year also you have been participating virtually. I don't know whether to thank the technology or what, but welcome you, Mr. Mahesh. His name is a bit complex. He's a very simple person. So can I request Mr. Mahesh, as we call him, to take over the floor now?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sudhi. Hope I'm audible. And it's a great pleasure to be part of the Urban Thinkers Campus, and especially the one which is organized by the MCCI. We have been, like what Mr. Sudhi did indicate, we have been associating with them for the last 3 years now, and it's always been a pleasure for two reasons. One, the kind of speakers and the panelists which they manage to bring together to debate on relevant issues has been quite phenomenal, and the kind of speakers we have today with us in our panel is pretty much the reflection of the same. And there is a continued tradition of getting experts talking and debating around what is needed for Chennai. And two, like she already mentioned, it is about the action, follow-up action post the event. You know, many a times you attend a conference and you debate and you argue and you discuss on certain things and people end up forgetting it. But documenting it, taking it forward to the right agency, and the MCCA has that kind of a power influence to knock on few doors and also ask them why such and such things are happening. Even questioning that has been a great effort over the years, and that has led to this forum being sustainable, and also the actions taken around some of the debated issues very relevant given the current times. I think even though we are not able to meet physically this time, I'm very much in Chennai. Actually, I landed up a day before the cyclonic storm pretty much took over the city. So I was lucky enough to land before the extreme weather event. But as we are speaking, there are two events which are happening. One is the COP, where people are thinking, how do we change the business as usual model. And here in Chennai, where people are trying to fight the weather to go about business as usual, And it's also important that MCCI, being a business entity, organizing this event to discuss about both ends of the spectrum. How do we manage these kinds of extreme events, whether you call it a climate variability, which we are experiencing right now over the last 10 years. And within the last 10 years, Chennai has pretty much faced, this is the second flood. And starting from 2017, there were 3 years of drought, continued drought, which peaked in 2019. And so there are these extreme events which do take place quite frequently. Their intensity has increased over time. And given the nature, I think what we are going to discuss, that the impact of climate change on cities and the need for climate proofing is going to be very, very important. We have Dr. Lavlesh Bandari talking about it, and the criticality of land use, land cover. I think the previous post the keynote, there was discussion around land use, land cover, and why flooding is taking place, how to avoid it, how to manage it in certain point is going to be talked about by Dr. Sugito Dutt. And how is Chennai prepared to cope with it? We have the chief engineer from the Greater Chennai Municipal Corporation, Mr. Rajendran, talking about it. And we also have Ms. Evelyn presenting case studies and sharing experience around some of the heat action plan. Before we start the session, I would like to go through a brief introduction of all our speakers. Dr. Lavlesh Bandari is an economist, and he's also president of Indicus Foundation. And he's currently, he leads Environmental and Sustainable Livelihood Initiative, and is also a senior fellow at CSEP, and he leads and develops the climate change capability at that particular institution. Dr. Sugito Dutt, he's an IFS, Indian Forest Service, former member secretary of the State Planning Commission, and he has extensive experience in the field of participatory protected area management, captive breeding, and issues related to public outreach with respect to wildlife conservation. He has worked with government agencies, research and training institutions, national and international NGOs, including Worldwide Fund for Nature and Center for International Forest Research and USAID. Mr. S. Rajendran, who is currently the chief engineer at Greater Chennai Corporation. He has been working in the Department of Storm and Water Drainage and Roads within the Greater Chennai Corporation, and he's been working with the city government for over 32 years now in various departments, including town planning, roads, bridges, special projects, smart city, mechanical, and general engineering. It's very important to know his perspective on the current situation and also what Chennai is planning to do in the future. Ms. Evelyn Brunswick is a sustainability advisor for the city of Rotterdam, and she's also been part of the development department of the city. In 2008, she started as an advisor on Rotterdam's Green Roof program and is currently one of the key advisors for the multifunctional roofscape program. She's has in the past created awareness around the issue of urban heat islands and how government can bring it into their policy, and also coordinating with international delegation, especially the Rotterdam adaptation strategy and Rotterdam resilience strategy. Welcome all the panelists. I'll invite the first speaker. Just a few basic rules. I think just being conscious of time, we'll have each speaker talk for around 10 to 15 minutes. If there is time left, then we can have 5 minutes of question answers from the audience. If otherwise, we'll move on to the next speaker and we'll take the question answers at the end. So without further ado, Dr. Lavlesh, the floor is yours, please. You are on mute. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Rajshekhar. Thank you, MCCI, Saraswati, for inviting me here. I have been here once in this panel, not in this panel, but at the MCCI meetings past, and it's been a pleasure, always is. So the topic that I need to speak after a great panel before me and another one and another group of speakers right after me is fairly challenging, which is how to deal with climate change challenges and also on how to make cities resilient. So I'll start off with, I have a problem with this term resilience, and I have a problem with this term adaptability and mitigation. Now, the issue is not that there is anything wrong in these terms. Yes, we do need to be resilient. Yes, we do need to adapt. Yes, we do need to mitigate the causes behind climate change. But if we look at the urban issues, starting from these three terms, we will always create a situation where we will just look at solutions without understanding the processes behind the solutions. Now, these three terms, resilience, adaptation, mitigation, originate in the West, where you have systems and processes, you have provincial governments, national governments, local governments, which are fairly well evolved, where you have infrastructure, which is very well set for whatever are the day-to-day challenges. And then when climate change hits, then you start to talk about, okay, how are we going to adapt to this? How are we going to mitigate the problems? And also, how are we going to be more resilient? So essentially, you're starting from a very high base, and then you have to talk about, how am I going to deal with this problem? India is very different. Our cities are not so well governed. The infrastructure is fairly poor. The city process, the governance processes have degenerated. If they were good at some point in time, I'm told they were, but well, we can all see that they have degenerated. And I'm not talking about 1 or 2 cities. I'm talking about the 8,000 odd cities and another 8,000 to 10,000 villages, which actually should be cities. Now, this is urban India. And so I'm going to start to talk about the issues of climate change with that in perspective. And since I have only 10 minutes, I'm going to very quickly go over. I've tried to categorize the level of challenges that we have. The first challenge, keeping with the topic at hand, is that of climate change. We are going to have cities which are going to be warmer. We are going to have extreme temperatures, which would mean both higher temperatures as well as lower temperatures in some parts of India. We're going to have precipitation volatility. Someone in the past session had mentioned this, that there are going to be periods where you're going to get extremely high levels of precipitation, and there are going to be periods of extreme dryness. And Chennai is a classic example of already starting to suffer. Well, it's always suffered, but the frequencies of these are increasing. We're going to, some parts of India are going to face far higher wind conditions. There is a fear, though it's not very certain yet, that cyclonic and wind conditions might actually increase as we go along. And then there are going to be all other issues around just the simple fact that temperatures are going to be higher. And one of them will obviously be the rising of ocean waters. And just to put things in perspective, Chennai is going to face almost all of these to varying levels of degrees, right? Now, this is the one class of challenges that we face, but there is another set of challenges, which is what I call the challenges that will come about due to our response to these challenges. So I'll just name a few. We're going to start to use far more levels of energy, especially electrical energy, because we are going to be moving away from fossil fuels to mostly electric dominate, both in mobility as well as, of course, for commercial use and for residential use. We are going to have a serious problem of garbage, which is, and also that related to battery disposal. There are challenges related to rooftop solar. There are challenges related to rooftop greens, and there are a lot of people trying to push that part of it, of trying to put green areas on top of roofs and so on. So there are going to be these kind of challenges. And of course, there is going to be the challenge of subsurface water, falling subsurface water levels, which is to some extent going to be exacerbated by climate change. So that's a second level of challenges, which are going to emerge as a response, well, as a result of our reaction to climate change. There are a third set of challenges. The third set of challenges are those that we have always suffered from. And let us never forget these challenges, because these are the challenges that lie at the core of the problem. And the first set of are those related to poor planning. Well, Chennai was not always a poorly planned city. At some point in time, we stopped listening to our planners. And as a result, a huge part of Chennai get developed in low-lying areas where there should not have been homes or there should not have been commercial areas, etc., etc. That's where we build them, in low-lying areas, on wetlands, on what were surface water bodies, and so on. So there was that set of issues. There's this issue related to public transport. Very few cities, and I think Chennai is luckier than many, very few cities have adequate public spaces. Now, is this going to really be linked to the problem of climate change? I will later talk about how these are all integrated problems. You cannot talk about adaptability without talking about the issue of public transport, or for that matter, mitigation, without looking at things like green areas or public spaces and so on. There is a problem of water supply. Well, I'm talking to most people who are living in Chennai, and we all know the problems here. Garbage disposal. We have not even started to face the massive challenges that we are going to face over the next 10 years. Okay, then there is the mixed land use issue, which at one point in time was a great solution, urban planning solution to the way India is structured. But at some point in time, we stopped using mixed land as a tool of urban and we started to allocate suburbs to residences, separate areas for commercial spaces, and so on. And that had its own dynamics. So there are these challenges about creating smaller cities, which are better integrated. They are talking about 15-minute cities globally. Well, we used to have at one point in time cities which were similar to what is now called 15-minute cities. But we gave that up some time back. And so on and so forth. So these are challenges that we face irrespective of the climate change issues. Okay? And then there is a fourth class of challenges, that even if we had good planning and everything was good, is the issue of implementation. We're just bad at implementing anything in urban India. And anyone who's traveled anywhere in the world would tend to agree that our cities tend to be amongst the worst governed anywhere in the world. And there is a problem there, and I will later identify what I feel is the most important reason behind that. So what we start to see, if you see bad infrastructure, that's not necessarily bad planning, it's just bad implementation. If you look at poorly managed landfills, it's not really necessarily bad planning, it's bad implementation. Or for that matter, broken pipes, or for that matter, the mixed up pipes between sewage and water disposal, which is a problem you have in just about every city in India. So these are all problems of implementation. Now, I have just shared 4 classic set of challenges, and the point I'm trying to make is that these need to be seen as integrated. These are not, let's just look at mitigation, or let's look at adaptation, or let's look at resilience. You cannot adapt, you cannot mitigate, you cannot be more resilient without looking at the planning problem and also the implementation problem. Now, having said that, it's nice to list out all the problems without trying to give it a way forward. It would really be not fair on my part. And I feel that there is a way forward, and I feel that there are lots of different opportunities that are coming our way. And I'm going to take about 5 minutes to just throw some of these thoughts at you. When we talk about, the first point I'm making, and I'm going to root everything around this, is that if you don't look at urban governance, you haven't solved any problem. We have to solve the urban governance problem in India. And one way of thinking about solving the problem is to just divide up the problems. And I'm doing this as a very rough categorization for lack of time, as a problem of funds, a problem of functions, and the problem of functionaries. We used to use this model for Panchayati Raj, addressing Panchayati Raj issues, but I think it also needs to be, it can very easily also be used to understand better the urban governance problem. Across India, there is a major debate going on amongst academics, but only amongst academics, not in policymakers, of whether we should have empowered mayors or directly elected and empowered mayors. The problem is that municipal governments, generally urban local bodies, are not really accountable. They're accountable perhaps to the state government, but not really to the people of India. So some people talk about a solution where if we had direct election of the person who heads the urban local body, could be a mayor, could be a CEO, etc., then perhaps that accountability will increase and that will get things loaded. Now, I also support that. except that it takes many years for these kind of democratic processes to mature. We are still trying to figure out all the problems related to center-state issues. Now we are going to the state and urban issues, etc., will again take a long time to solve, and climate change is happening much quicker. So I propose that there is another way. Currently, most cities in India are governed by a bureaucrat. Typically, who's in the larger cities, it's a municipal commissioner, and the municipal commissioner is answerable to the urban development ministry at the state capital. Now, we just need to create a new mechanism by which the municipal commissioner's progress or his career is to some extent rewarded or punished depending upon how well he or she has performed at in his capacity as the commissioner. The commissioner is, by the way, the most empowered officer in the local bodies in most parts of India. So perhaps that's one thing that we can do, which will be much quicker. It may not have many political economic implications. That's one. The second thing that we need to do is a problem of there is not enough capacity. A lot of, at one point in time, again, I am told, that there used to be some great technocrats who used to be in urban local bodies, used to work in urban local bodies. Over a period of time, that was no longer a very attractive job, and the best people would not apply to urban local bodies for a career. I think we need to bring that back, and one possibility is to think of some sort of how do you put it, a cadre of urban local body professionals. Perhaps we can have a common exam, and even if we don't have a common exam, perhaps we can have some sort of a standardization and improve their capacities. Here there is, ideas have been floated in the past, and I'm just repeating some of them. One possibility is to utilize a lot of people who retire, who take early retirement from the defense services, who have some capacities to running processes and also in systems to try and get them to start to run urban local bodies. So that's one part. The second thing that I would like to talk about is funding. Across India, urban local bodies rarely tax property taxes properly. Even if they are taxed, they are very poorly collected. And even if they are collected, the rates are very low, and so on and so forth. India has amongst the lowest effective taxation of property. Again, it's political economic issues. Democracy is not easy. In democracies, it is not easy to manage many kinds of taxes, and perhaps that is one issue. But I think with climate change and our movement towards electrical vehicles, we have a huge opportunity coming our way for urban local governments. And let me just, I'll take a couple of minutes to talk about this. State governments were phenomenally lucky when petroleum started to become a larger and larger part of India's mobility expenditures. Because of the VAT revenues, roughly about 8 to 10% of any average state revenues, state government revenues, 8 to 10% of all their revenues are coming in from petroleum. Now, these are going to the state governments. No one about 20 years back would have thought that that can be such a major part of state government revenues. What we don't realize is that electric vehicles will be far cheaper than the kind of vehicles we are used to. These vehicles will be so cheap that, at effective today's rate, already we are talking about electric vehicles being as cheap as petroleum in another couple of years. In 10 years, they would be roughly half or even a third of the cost. Now, if that is the case, then that gives leeway to urban local bodies to start actually, rather than taxing property, you can also start to tax private transport. And that can be a very large additional source of revenue. Because in the end, you cannot get credit, you cannot get loans if you do not have some sources of revenues. And if property taxes are difficult, then perhaps this can be another alternative. So that's as I said, another opportunities. The last one, which I'd like to talk about, is that of expertise. Now, fortunately, in India, whether it is IT, or it is accounting, or it is management consulting, you have amongst the best consultants globally who are in India. But somehow, strangely, till now, local bodies are very rarely using all of this expertise. All of this would be possible to access if you have a head of a local body who's better empowered and more accountable, and of course, access to funds. So yes, I have not directly talked about resilience, and I'm not directly talking about adaptation and so on. Those are solutions, those are technology solutions. There are projects of various types, there are experiments and pilots, and more will come up as we go along. But until and unless you have the governance mechanism, it will be very difficult to build this resilience. So with that, my 15 minutes are up, I see, and so I'll stop here. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Lavlesh, for stressing the importance of funds, functionaries, and functions in the urban context, and also trying to bring together the importance of urban planning. And it's not only planning that's important, it's implementation, which needs to be given equal consideration, and how it is done over time is of importance. In the audience, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type in the chat message. You can do that now for Mr. Lavlesh, or if you want to do that, over time, that's also going to be fine. We can have another round of discussion with all the panelists at the end of the session. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lavlesh. With that, I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Dr. Sugato Dutt, who is the former Member Secretary, State Planning Commission. Dr. Dutt, the floor is over to you. Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Rajshekhar. I would take just a few seconds to get my
So there's a bit of a disturbance from your end.
together
Please.
and share.
Sure.
I think your voice is breaking, Mr. Dutt.
I'm not sure if I have a slightly poor internet connectivity, but that might just be the reason. I have unmuted myself, and hopefully.
And now you're sounding better. I think the voice is more,
okay.
Much better
just
now.
Just a few seconds while I have my PPT up.
While Dr. Dutt is about to present his screen, I once again request all the participants, if you have any questions, please do type it in the chat box. Also do indicate the name of the panelist whom you're addressing it to. That will help us have another round of discussion with these eminent panelists at the end of the session. Thank you.
In the meanwhile, there is a question, Mahesh. Maybe you want to take it up, or Mr. Lavish? Someone has, Mr. Ranju John has asked, could you please elaborate the taxation on vehicles, as road tax is already there, is the point?
Sure.
Sure.
Probably,
yeah,
since
so
Dr. Dutt is back online, we'll take up the question at the end of the session. Dr. Dutt, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is about the criticality, of course, of the land use and land cover in the planning process. And sure what's wrong again, but I seem to be having issues with taking the slides forward. Yes, please. I hope I'm visible again, and then I hope I'm
Yes.
also audible.
You're
Okay.
audible and
Thank you very much.
visible.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the little bit of a late start. And then I will concentrate on the idea of coastal cities because I think this has strong relevance today to Chennai. And then again, I mean, I'm very strongly aware that most of the cities across the world are coastal. At least the mega cities are coastal. And this presentation of mine is going to be broken up into three parts of what constitutes the planning process, what is within land use significant, how is it significant, and why is it significant. Now, cities, obviously we all know where are centers of the economy, centers of job creation, centers of populations, and more importantly, centers of a whole variety of interlinked systems, whether they be of power, communication, transport, water supply, and they're all put together critical, absolutely critical to the smooth functioning of cities. Now, again, cities, I think, are significant because they do contribute and disproportionate to the area they occupy on the planet's surface to the problem of emissions. And coastal cities in particular are vulnerable again because of the rising sea level to issues of erosion, to saltwater intrusion, and all of this is happening because of the continuity and the frequency of the intense storms that we are all witness to within of Chennai, and I'm sure within other cities of the world as well. Now, going ahead, I would like to draw attention. I've always been fascinated, having worked in Chennai and its surrounds for quite a period of time. I've been very fascinated with the fact that Chennai is part of a larger floodplain of something like not one, but two, but four rivers, actually. And it is this combination of a floodplain with its interspersed wetlands that was really responsible for the ease of trade and the ease of communication that led up to the older civilizations being so prominent in this part of the world. Now, wetlands have also been a critical space for water storage and to mitigate drought. We've heard our eminent panelists in the opening session, and they've all brought back their connections to Chennai, and they have mentioned the repeated droughts and the fact that it was this ability to store water in the wetlands that helped cope the frequency of crises that was witnessed here. But of late, and in particular the last perhaps 2 decades, we've seen a very irregular urban growth that are impeding now this whole process of the flow of water and drainage that has been so prominent in the historical past. Now let's look at the hydrology of the landscape. Now, as we all know, and we're all acutely aware that ours is a hydrology dependent on seasonal patterns of rainfall. We have peaks of monsoon weather in southern India. Of course, it's mostly the winter rains that we are concerned with, and of course the rest of the country, it's very much the southwest monsoon or the summer rains. Now, there's been a series of tanks and marshes which have been acting as sponges, and they've been able to, imbibe the runoff, the surface runoff, and infiltrate it down and store it in the artesian wells, essentially as surface water for irrigation, and it is precisely the disuse of this when the agricultural economy transitioned to a modern industrial economy, that the disuse of these series of tanks and their conversion into dumps, debris for waste and sewage and so on with the growing urbanization that has been the problem, I feel, in the recent past. Now, let's keep going ahead. And see that Chennai's urban growth has actually been accelerated because of the this rush of capital that came into our region, particularly at the turn of this century. It is this phenomenal rise in investments that fueled the purchase of land in the peri-urban spaces outside of Chennai, in the villages. And most of the growth that kept happened along the transportation infrastructure, the radial growth, if you will. And as you can see in this little diagram that I put in, the bulk of the growth in urban population density seem to be happening somewhere around the southwardly direction of the city. Now, why is land use change significant? Let's take a look at some stats. During the decades between the mid-1990s to about the mid-2000s, the built-up area in Chennai and its surrounds have gone up by something like more than 50%. And while a similar decline has happened in agriculture. And if you take a look at the table at the last line there, the water bodies themselves have declined from something like 28 square kilometers to 22 square kilometers. Something like 6 square kilometers of water bodies have actually just vanished. How did they disappear? That little picture at the bottom of the screen shows you that it was primarily due to the rapid expansion of infrastructure, highways, whether it was special export zones, and so on and so forth. This picture dramatizes for me what happened to the Pallikaranai marsh, that huge space of marshy wetland, where the bulk of the IT investments happened. And as you can see, this has begun to shrunk the marsh on both sides of the main highway that we see here. Now, Chennai's population has climbed from 35 lakhs in 1971 to about 70 odd lakhs in the turn of this century. By 2026, it's projected to go at 120 lakhs. And what would happen to land use change? We can only shudder to think. Look, let's take a look again at how this issue of land use change has been exacerbating the problem of frequent flooding. Heavy rains, of course, we all attribute to the whole phenomenon of climate change. What really has happened with urbanization is that we have completely destroyed the floodplain ecology. Drainage is impeded. The torrential downpour has no passageway into the underground, and all that accumulated water in the large tanks, the large lakes that we are so familiar with, Chembarampakam, Red Hills, and so on and so forth, that release of that accumulated water has created a century.
We are not able to hear you, Mr. Subratha.
Dr. Dutt, if it's possible, then you can try to switch off your video so that you may get some additional bandwidth. We were not able to hear you for the last 1 minute. So could you please repeat the last couple of sentences? Thank you.
Real estate. And if we shifted to today's Buckingham Canal, you would notice that it has shrunk phenomenally, and the infrastructure around it has grown to a tremendous degree. There's metro rails, there's the MRTS system, there are buildings of all kinds, and of course, they are the encroachments of the poor who are just to double check, I hope I'm a little better audible now.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay.
You are much.
Thank you.
We are able to hear you much better.
Okay, thank you. And let's get to the why of resilience. One of the things that does strike me in all the frameworks that have been presented in the larger documents across the world, of course, is the definition, and the definition, as we all know, is to rebound after destruction. But what is really, to me, striking is cities are really a system of systems, and these systems could be socio-economic, and they could be systems of governance, as Mr. Lavish Bhandari has so forcefully explained. It is really an issue of how much we are able to devolve, decentralize, concentrate our governance systems. And I would like to say how this mismatch between governance and the use of the resource that we have, the environmental resource that we have, then gets to be a problem in our tackling the resilience issue. Now, we go on then to risk management per se. We do manage risk, and we do that in various ways. Broadly structural approaches by looking at the sewers, the drains, the surface water management apparatus, our flood defense structures, and so on. Phenomenal, obviously, spent on this. But how much of it is beyond visibility? The system of interconnectedness of tanks which fell into disuse. What is it that has destroyed that interconnectivity between tanks? Is it merely the expansion of civil engineering structures? And why is it that traditional practice of collectively clearing the channels, the nullas, the gullies that interconnected the tanks has come to a complete halt? And why is it that we just dredge one lake here and one tank there and forget the entire system? My suggestion is that because the non-structural systems don't integrate so well in the risk management process, how much there is of the awareness campaign, of the public health management, of the evacuation processes when disaster strikes, we do not know. And I think, again, it gets back to what Mr. Bhandari has been so forcefully emphasizing. We're very good at planning, but what happens during the implementation is anybody's guess. Now, the planning framework, in my mind, has three big necessities. We need to integrate these systems together, the non-structural and the structural system. And that is to allow the flow of information and the close cooperation between the various stakeholders that operate these systems. We definitely need to be inclusive. We cannot be privileging one sector or community or location at the cost of another. And we need to have broad consultations with all to be completely inclusive. And of course, we need to be flexible. We need to be able to tackle things on priority when the necessity does arise. We need to adopt technologies that are fresh and new and do not put us, parked up in the past. So nature-based solutions to me are important because they reduce the exposure, they reduce vulnerability, they help us prepare better for response and recovery. I'd like to end with an example of the restoration that has recently happened to the Vandalur Lake. a medium-sized lake at the southern extremity of the country. And again, with this picture, you could see of the state. I'm sorry. This lake now, as you can see, it's just bordering the GST highway. It has the tri-junction of several important, SEZs. Now, this has been stagnating with a whole lot of effluents from solid wastes in the urban settlements that have come up in its surrounds in the recent past. So it was not just dredging alone, but it was also an intensive process of de-weeding to reverse the eutrophication that was happening on the lake that brought it back to life. But alongside with this was a very intense effort at spreading community awareness and making sure that the evacuation plans are all completely in place should and when the floods happen. And then last but not the least, it also integrated the crucial aspect of public health management. So it's not just restoring the tank alone that was significant, but a whole set of interconnected systems, some structural, some not structural, that were brought into place. And I wanted to close with one more slide, just highlighting, it's not a slide, it's a video. I'm not too sure if it will play, but I'll make an attempt. And this is the coastal seascape. I'll just put this on. And you can see how the mouth of the Adyar estuary opens up into the seacoast. But what is significant here is the classification of the infrastructure. They are dwelling houses of the poor, the middle income, and the very high income as well, all coming together in one physical space. It is this that we have to integrate together. So thanks very much. This is all I have to say.
Thank you, Dr. Dutt, for highlighting the complexity of the critical services which are there in the urban infrastructure, and also the importance of, nature-based solutions, and especially how and why it's important to preserve some of these wetlands and also water bodies, and the role they play in terms of, the urban management and also water sustainability. Once again, participants, please do type your questions within the chat box so we can take it together, or we can take it after the panelists go about their presentation. Without further ado, I would like to call upon the next speaker, Mr. S. Rajendra, who's the Chief Engineer General of Greater Chennai Corporation. Sir, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. Please witness this video. Just I am coming from the flood mitigation, flood confronting place.
Sir, can I play the video?
Yeah, please. Yeah, you can very well see me that I am sitting with a raincoat instead of a regular coat, because I want to show the potential impact of the present rain, which is now lashing at Chennai. Lashing at Chennai. Please see this video. This is the present scenario of my Chennai city, and because of 23 centimeter rain and 6 centimeter in an hour and 23 centimeter in 24 hours. So this is the real scenario of Chennai. Please see the video. It's not running, huh?
Sir, I have just muted it.
Okay, okay, that's good. You can rush through. You can rush through, please. You can rush through.
Jay, you can fast forward.
Forwarded here, that's what he's saying.
Okay, no
Yeah.
problem. You stop the video. Stop the video. You stop the video. You stop the video. And upload my PPT.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, upload my PPT. Can I speak? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I can say this is a wet evening for me. To present before you, I am working in Chennai Corporation for the past 32 years and the Chennai city resident of 54 years. Yeah. The Chennai city is the climate. The climate regarding the Chennai city is the hottest. And to go through this, all these statistics, you people might be knowing this. My daily garbage generation is 5,100 metric ton, and my stormwater drain. So you can see the minimum temperature is 24.51. So with that itself, we can know how cold the city will be, and the humid conditions are 39 to 95%. Next. Yeah. The cyclone, droughts, flash rains, periodical floods, and cloud bursts, thunder, and lightning, everything we experience now. Previously, my monsoon period was 45 days. But now, in that 45 days, the irregular rain will come for 5 centimeter, 2 centimeter, 3 centimeters like that. Now it is coming as 20 centimeter, 30 centimeter, 15 centimeters. These are the flash rains. Next. Next. Yeah. I will be presenting more of statistics. My average rainfall is 1,324. My city is a very good, wealthy city because I feel the rain is a wealth. I welcome the rain always. And I used to get the rain from the southwest monsoon as well as northeast monsoon. When the southwest monsoon comes, all my lakes and water resources will be mostly 90% filled. So my northeast monsoon it is once again going to become a overloaded waterways. Next. Yeah, these are all the statistics which I can say during 1969, 2005, 15, and how the rain pattern occurred. Next. So this is the 2015 flood recorded 1,113.80 millimeter of rainfall. And 1918, it was only 1,080.4 mm. A maximum rainfall recorded on 2/12/2015, 390. So here the city is having two rivers and some waterways, tributary waterways, about 7 canals, and all the micro and macro drains are connected to those canals only, and those canals are in turn connected to the rivers. This was a simple statistic of 2015 rainfall. You can very well see the 2nd December. Yeah, this one is the Chennai Buckingham Canal, Adayar Kuvam. Now all these waterways are ending at the sea. This area is only plus 2 meters MSL. So whenever there is a high tide, the water getting discharged from those rivers are getting affected. And moreover, the sand travels from south to north because of the artificial port in this Madras port. So always sand want to fill the artificial port rough, and there will be always dredging. When the sand travels, it closes the mouth of Adayar, Kuvam, and Yennur Creek. Next. So this is the simulations of 2015 flood. Next. So damages and mitigations, 859 places of Chennai city inundated due to heavy rainfall, 2015. The resilience is how I came out in a week's time with the machineries, that is 470 pumps, sets, and 49 fire service and 75 super suckers. And 280 boats are used for rescuing the people from the low-lying area. These are all some photographs where the flood inundation was there. This is the Adayar River, and in Velachery. Next. In Pallikarnai, Tiruvettriyur. And now the super sucker, old super sucker machines are being used in Ramnagar, Velachery, Madhavaram area. Freefall, how it is being dealt with. And these are all the subways. Subways are the problem. They are being the lowest points from where we have to pump from the well to the stormwater drains placed above the subways. After 2015, immediately we faced the Varda cyclone. In which the Varda cyclone traveled like this, and 100 to 110 km per hour was gusting to 120 km per hour. Next. Previous. Yeah. 17,157 avenue trees were uprooted, and the rainfall recorded was very less. It was only 11 centimeter. And these are all the damages you see. So these are all the strategies we have found to how to come out from the climatic problems and these disasters. Next. So reduction for resilience, implementation of disaster risk reduction strategies, investment in the integrated stormwater. One thing I want to tell you is actually the drains, actually they are having some 5,600 kilometers of roads. We were having only 1,000, around only 800 kilometers of the drain. Later, after this 2015 flood, and though my drains are only designed for 5 centimeter rain in 1 hour, my drains are only having that carrying capacity. The World Bank and other foreign agencies said they can give us money, but my design of the drain has to be changed. So we have modified up to 6.8 centimeters, 68 mm, our rainfall, number one. By this way, the carrying capacity increases. And the rest, there are previously the people were using their community wells. Now, at the edge, to the edge of the road, now they have constructed. There is no space for making the rainwater harvesting and all. But the community wells are present. So what we started connecting all the roofs and unconnected to the community wells. Like similarly, we made some 1,500 wells because previously the community was only depending on the community well. So those community wells are very well used, and restoration and regeneration of, we have identified some 200 water bodies and temple tanks, and we have connected the stormwater in. The challenge was only 8 lakh houses out of 12 lakhs houses are having only drainage connection. So 4 lakh houses do not have any drainage connections. Moreover, my stormwater drain behaved, or it's a paradise for the CMWSSB to let out the drain overflow connections, which in turn go to my water body. So regeneration and restoration of temple tanks is a challenge. Mylapore tank, temple tanks and all. Whenever I connect due to some sewage connections or sewage pollutions, the temple tank used to get sewage water also. So we have taken much pain to have attention towards those tanks. And with RWHS and sunken well somewhere, suppose there may be a huge investment needed to construct a stormwater drain. There we do not construct a stormwater drain. Locally, we settle the water by the sunken wells and with scientifically topped up. And one German technology, sponge city concept has come. There are a lot of trays like circulation pits are there. We make some huge wells like that, and we place all these gratings over there, and that is working well. Right. And some of the restored well I have posted here. Actually, including that well, all these wells are connected to the stormwater drain. Number one, all these ponds are connected. Number two, we used to have some small walkway in the local community who can go around the pond and have some leisure time. Next, some of the pictures only. You can pass past. Yeah, these are the echo blocks which I told you, the sponge city blocks. Yeah, this is the, and you can, this we have applied over here and made the temple tank get recharged. Next. Rush through. So we are having integrated command and control center in which we are having drain gauges in many places, and in subways we have the sensors. So from the command and control center itself, we can identify which subway is getting flooded, what are the rain levels of in many places. Next, you can rush through. My time is getting over. Yeah. Next. Yeah, smart sensors where rain gauges we have. Yeah. Next. 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 So flood camera locations we have, and we are having flood monitoring pole at Adayar river, and wherever suppose in between there may be a flooding, which will be informed to our command and control center. Next. Yeah, this is the Adayar nature bridge mouth, Kuam mouth. Yeah. Next. This is how the Padikum Canal, at flood monitoring at Padikum Canal, we used to have some markings and we identify the flood levels, and accordingly we make our stormwater drains. Suppose this water level raises up to the stormwater drain top or the pre-board, then the water will start getting reversed. So we are now going to have shutters over there. As long as it is going to allow the water, we are going to open the shutter. If the water is getting back flow, then we will close it and we will pump and give a remedy to the inundation to the public. Next. These are all subway we monitor. Yeah. Next. Rush through. These are all self-explanatory, where these are all the smart poles we install in many places, and we will identify the way to mitigate. We are having a control room running by 24/7, and control room personnel will be available there, because Chennai city is administered by so many number of government agencies, PWD, highways. As a whole, corporation is not maintaining. But when we have to coordinate with so many number of bodies, so we call all the personnel from them, and they sit over the control room and monitor to get things easier. Yeah, these are all the infrastructures we have to. Even now, some 500 pumps are being operated to avoid flooding. Next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for the amazing presentation where you took us through some of the wonderful efforts which have been undertaken by the Greater Chennai Municipal Corporation, including the ICCC, which has been recently been established. Very happy to know that a lot of people come together, at least the different stakeholders. Usually that is one of the biggest challenge, coordinating between across various agencies. And I'm sure that with your current efforts, that issue has been addressed to a certain degree.
And I think we should give a very special thanks to him because he had been, I know how busy they have been. They are all fighting the thing. So a very special thanks to you, Mr. Rajendran. From the chamber.
I can remove my raincoat now. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, in spite of your busy schedule, I know that even the participants may have a lot of questions with the ongoing situation, whether it is very similar to 2015 and what you foresee, how it is going to pan out. But so, given your time constraint, do you want to hold and take a few questions right now
Yeah.
before we move to the next panelist?
Yeah, please. Please.
Sure. So, sorry, Evelyn, given the urgency and he's also managing the emergency issue within the municipal corporation, it's better to hold on and take a few questions for Dr. Rajendran. So while we wait for more questions on the chat board, so my question is, will the 2015 scenario, if that is going to be, I mean, the current scenario, if it is going to be similar to 2015 conditions where the November rains are quite heavy and a possibility of an intense cyclone emerging in December or possibility of extreme rainfall in December, leading to flood-like situation. Of course, there are a lot of things which you're monitoring right now and being prepared. But what would be your advice to industries and people at large? What do you think they should be aware of, and what do you think they should be doing?
Yeah, it will never be like 2015 situation, number one. Any amount of precipitation, we are ready to face, number one. Number two, the thing is, my northeast monsoon gives me copious rain and my stomach is full. So the southwest monsoon. So when a new northeast monsoon comes again, so it is there is two different bodies. One is PWD who is opening the floodgates, okay, and IMD is giving the forecast of the rain. Number two. So now both are of conflict of interest. Number one, my PWD people do not want to open the lake because they want water because we are prone to drought also. During the time, the blame will come to them that you opened, you let out all the water to the sea. Okay. So now it is being monitored. Actually, the weather forecast is the most uncertain one. Yeah, 50 to 60%. Even they have not told we will get 23 centimeters of rain. Yeah, 3 days back. We were only expecting, waiting for some 5 to 6 to 7 centimeters of rain. But 23 centimeters come. So after 23 centimeter only, during the time of rain, we will not pump. Since our MSL is very low and the high tide and the cyclone, heavy flow of air and all, so when the sea do not permit us to discharge our water, and in many places there are undulation of these flames and all, so water stagnates. So pumping is the only solution. We are not sitting on the downside of a hill or anything else. So, so our challenge is now according to the intensity of rain, we have to go for 100 HP, 150 HP, or like that. We were only ready for 15 to 20, 25 HP, 50 HP. But the flooding has come in a huge way, the 23 centimeters. So during the time, sometime water will stay. After that, it will go. By the time, I request everybody to bear with us for us to give the mitigation at the earliest possible time.
Thank you very much, sir. There's one another question. How how does the smart sensors and smart pole work, and what technology and how accurate it is in real time?
Yeah, GIS only. This is real time. We are connecting through GIS only, and it is having a range, just like a Google Map. It's having a range, but it's okay. It's acting very good. Not only this flood thing, some robbery. What is the condition here? We are having some more many number of parameters. So during the time, if it changes, it will flag the issue. We are having a very big command and control room at Chennai Corporation, and moreover, we are further we are going for intelligent transport systems, ITS, ITMS management systems, and many. And we are having the bridges, the lighting and all. We are connecting everything to the command and control. Suppose if we want to, if the day is Republic Day or some Independence Day, then the entire bridges will be going with tricolor like that. In that way, it is working very nicely. Yeah, we are improving.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your time, and also for all your efforts you're doing to make Chennai city a safe place for us to live in. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Without further ado, let's move on to our next speaker, Ms. Evelyn Bronsek, who's a sustainability advisor on Urban Development Department, Municipality of Rotterdam. Evelyn, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for asking me to join this this conversation. I have prepared a presentation, so I will try to share it.
We begin the sharing rights.
Yes, madam, given. Yes, I have given her.
You can do now, Evelyn. Yeah.
Do you all see my presentation now, or not yet?
No, we are able to see. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. I have been working at the municipality of Rotterdam for the last.
Sorry, can you make it full screen, or can you go to the view to make it full screen?
Yeah.
It's Control L. So you can just go and type Control L. You can go back to the screen.
Yeah.
And just use Control L to make it full screen.
Okay. Check again. I can't find button. Is it okay if I just move on?
Yes, I think it should be
yes,
fine.
Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it. You can go ahead with the presentation. That should be fine.
Okay, thank you. So Rotterdam is one of the Delta cities in the Netherlands. About 80% of the city is below sea level at the max even 6 meters below sea level. So everything we do, we have to take water as a theme into account. We have to face the rising sea levels, the rising rivers, increasing rainfall, and of course take the groundwater into account. So the difficulties and the challenges that we face are flooding, salinization, but also the urban heat island effect, and of course the health problems that can occur from all the extreme events. So what we have been working on at the municipality for the last 20 years is to create a sponge function for the city. And what we are aiming for is to create small-scale solutions on a large scale. And we do it by including every square meter that we can find. So we start by delaying the rainwater to flood the sewer system in times of heavy rainfall by implementing green roofs. On street level, we use things like pavement, but when you look at the Soho district, which we aim to make climate neutral, we also have smart rain barrels that are connected to the weather forecast. So we can empty them before heavy rainfall is expected. We also, and I included one of the pictures of the Bentham Square Water Plaza, include extra water storage capacities at squares and even in underground parking garages. So in case we suffer from extreme rainfall, we have a flexible system where we can store the amount of water that we cannot cope with the robust sewer system that we have. And by implementing all those extra layers, we try to create a flexible city to prevent the streets from flooding. When you look at the rooftop potential in Rotterdam, the city was severely bombed during the Second World War. And the way we rebuild it is mostly with flat roofs. So about 3/4 of the roofs in Rotterdam are flat. It totals to about 18 square kilometers of flat roofs in the city center. So that's a lot of space that is not used. And when you look at all the challenges that we face that are becoming increasingly complex, we decided to use that space and see if we can make smart combinations to give a function on the roofscape and to find answers for the challenges that we are facing. So what started merely as a technical solution to delay the runoff from the roofs towards the sewer system in the Green Roofs program in 2008 has now expanded to the Roofscape program that we run up until next year. And I will try to give the context of the program to you. First of all, there are 7 pillars that are not so much about the technical solutions, but mostly based on the soft skills. And I would like to stress this because when you look at the ownership of the city, it is roughly divided in 40% public owned and 60% privately owned. And when we want to become a resilient city, we need the full 100% of the city to make that change. And the best way to do it is to try to turn it into an attractive proposition to the companies and citizens in our city. So we made the pillars about informing the citizens and the organizations about the possibilities that the roofscape offers, try to come up with inspiring projects, and stimulating the implementation of roofs by means of a subsidy, developing a policy not only within our municipality but also on a national scale. Networking is very important because we need the companies involved to see what we are aiming for and play their part in innovative ideas, and also influencing when needed legislation. For example, the building legislation. Last year we have launched the rooftop catalog, and the rooftop catalog is a production that we have been making with MVRDV, the architectural firm, the cultural event Rotterdam Rooftop Days, and the municipality of Rotterdam. And what it includes is about 130 innovative ideas that give useful information on the possibilities that flat roofs can offer and how to address the challenges. And it helps us to start a discussion and reprogram rooftops because we need that space to come up with solutions for the challenges. We have defined a whole lot of parameters, like 7 functions. You can find them on the left-hand side. What started with green roofs as an aim to store the rainwater on the roofs. So just the green function and the blue function has expanded into the color red also for recreative solutions, in case people want to live on the roofs as well. And the yellow function is for clean energy solutions, solar systems, small wind energy. Purple is the color that we pointed out to start searching for possibilities to create tiny house villages on top of existing roofs. The gray rooftops is for the technical solutions, and the orange ones for mobility on top of roofs, but also in between roofs. And I will explain a little bit about it more. We have defined several types of buildings and included the goals of the United Nations. And what we are looking for is to point out the typical challenges in a certain area and then try to find the best combinations for the functions on the roof. So it's beyond choosing one function, but really searching for smart combinations. I've included a few of the values and financial benefits. What we have found is that there are a whole lot of values to be found when you start using the roofs in terms of increasing the biodiversity, in terms of the cooling effect of the green roofs, in terms of the possibility of reusing the rainwater for purposes, decreasing energy use in times of heat waves, etc., etc. And what we have come up with are just this is just a slide from the catalog. A whole lot of different functions. Here you can see the tiny houses on top of an existing building, as I mentioned earlier on. And this is an example of a care center that you could place, for example, on top of a schoolyard to make it a resilient and safe location. And as you can see, everything is defined by the colors and the use of the roofscape. One includes a pop-up museum and a sky bar, and this is one of the examples that was opened last week, so I wanted to include that into the presentation. It's the depot from the Boijmans Museum, and it is placed, there are 75 trees placed on top of the building. There will be a restaurant on top of the roof, and the museum itself is the former storage of all the artwork that wasn't hanging in the museum itself, which is the building on the right hand side. So they really have combined all those smart functions, created an attractive way to use the roofscape in the city center of Rotterdam. The groene kaap roughly translate in a green construction. Groen is green in Dutch, and this is building block. It's 4 different buildings that are connected by a walking bridge. There's a public park placed on top of those apartments, and the private gardens and the public park are combined on all those buildings. It's in one of the former harbors of Rotterdam, and the walk over the roofs ends in a nice view over the harbor. As you can see, they've placed solar panels. So here you can see the mobility in between the buildings by adding bridges in between the buildings. Adding green. There's also the possibility for urban farming on the roofs, and this is how we try to combine as much functions on space that wasn't used in this way before. Here you can see the walking route. And the last one I wanted to show you is the Little Sea complex, which is also a building that has been realized last year. It's a polder roof, and a polder roof is a smart roof with expanded water storage capacity that is connected with sensors, also to the weather forecast. It enables us to reuse the rainwater that has been captured before to water the plants. But it's also possible to empty the water storage capacity when the forecast predicts heavy rainfall, so that we can completely use the capacity that we need to the fullest. What is interesting is that by using that system of the dynamic smart flow control, we were enabled to increase the amount of green in this building complex. And the trees that were put here were bigger than we would have been able to place there when we just stuck to the traditional way of using the ground, because of the increasing effectiveness of the rainwater usage. The Hofbogentracé is the last one I would like to point out to you. It's a former railway track towards the beach and almost 2 kilometers long. It will be designed for the full 2 kilometers. Right here is the former station. The part over here is a place where many events happened, which is attractive because the railway track is a very strong building, because of obviously the trains that ran over it. And what we are aiming for right now in this district, which is suffering from a heat island effect, is to add more green. Biodiversity is a very big topic here when it comes to the design, and it is currently designed by the urbanisten who aim to bring back the balance from biodiversity to the way we use the green space as a people. So there will be a walking path for the people, but there will also be a path really focused on the biodiversity to increase the butterflies and hedgehogs, etc., etc. So it's not just created for the people, but more in balance with nature. In case you need more information or have any questions, these are my contacts. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I included some extra information in case people have questions about some more detailed information. I think my time is up now, so I will return to
Thank you very much, Evelyn, for taking us through some of the innovative techniques which are being undertaken by the Rotterdam Municipal Corporation, and especially with respect to the green roof. I think, and the Off Garden, increasing the green spaces is going to be very critical, because Chennai has a similar kind of a weather, hot and humid, especially during the summer months. And I think much of the technology which is being used there may also apply. And some of the things which you mentioned around water management, that is the dual multi-purpose spaces, landscapes, especially using a playground for water retention, or using a subway for water retention, which usually happens in Madras, where most of the subways are the water retention ponds. Unfortunately, they also become the critical infrastructure in terms of mobility and also transportation. So how do we look at planned flooding within urban landscape, and also planned water management, especially within the rooftop? You were talking about that. It also makes sense that in Chennai, there are a lot of homes which do have an underground water tank and also overhead water tank. If advance warning, like what the previous gentleman was talking about, if we could get that 72-hour warning, probably people can empty their water tank and store the rainwater or harvest the rainwater more effectively during these critical times. Thank you very much for your presentation. I request all the panelists to please switch on your video and mic. We have a few questions. I know, Dr. Lavlesh could not be with us throughout the session because he had some emerging work coming up. But that said, there are two questions, one for Dr. Datta. The first question is how the land use or what is the appropriate land use for proper habitability? And the second question for you is like, how do we, reverse the trend of rapid urbanization by prioritizing development, especially taking into consideration the adaptation to climate change, rather than just the theory. So,
maybe could I take the second one first?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think there's no way that we can get away from this phenomenon of growing urbanization. It's there to stay with us, and we're at approximately in a state of Tamil Nadu about 50% urbanized, probably a little more, and the trend is just going to continue. So that's just not going to happen. What we can definitely bring the focus back into is how will the peri-urban spaces where the expansion is happening adopt the agenda of resilience, of sustainable use of water as a resource to prompt and
Dr. Dutt, we lost your
kind of problem that we have.
Please come back. Can you repeat the last sentence, please?
I think he still has connectivity issues.
Right. So while we wait for Dr. Dutt, yes, sir, please.
The per capita, the scarcity of
Your
resources
music,
I seem to be open.
I can hear you now.
Okay. So the scarcity of resources is our major challenge given the huge population that we have. And that is where the equitable distribution of the resources, the equitable distribution of the income from the resources is where the focus should be shifting. I think the first question that you mentioned was more to do with, I'm not sure I got it correctly, but I think it was to do with habitation, human habitation. Again, the issue of per capita availability of land itself would be the primary problem. But the fact is that we are moving towards a more, very gradually, moving towards a more equitable distribution of income, and with it, a more equitable approach. Approaches are being adopted to make the distribution of not just land as a resource more available, but incomes are very, very gradually rising. More important, access to capital of various kinds, whether it's natural capital or financial capital and so on and so forth. That's very gradually changing with the ease of credit and innovative ways of managing finance are getting penetrating into different layers of society. So with that, I think the whole issue of equitable housing / habitation would come. But our major challenge continues to be the per capita scarcity of resources. And I think that's where all the attention should be going, equitable distribution of resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that wonderful explanation. I also agree that the urbanization is going to take place because the aspiration of people to access services is quite high. And when urban areas are stressed in catering to some of the critical services, I think rural areas are facing far more greater challenges, especially when it comes to healthcare, education, and also, proper sanitation, water supply, and so on and so forth. So with that, I'll move on to the next panelist. Evelyn, there is a question for you. Given the connectivity between rooftops via bridges, is there a security risk for the residents? Because houses and the spaces will be more visible from these places or locations. And there are also any security issues associated with it.
In terms of security for people looking into the houses and the risk of theft, is that the question for breaking in?
Yes.
Well, I don't think that the risk is bigger than all the houses just on street level. So it is not a topic that we included as something that needed extra attention. And to be honest, I hope that time will prove us right. What we are trying to do in Rotterdam is to find new ways, because obviously we really do have to. So everything we do is by grasping the chance to learn something new and to try with our things work out the way we hoped for. So most is done with stakeholder engagement. Mostly we include the stakeholders, and by including them, we try to define the difficulties and the problems before we start designing. And that's mostly how we do it. With the CAP, it is a public park, and when trouble will show up, we will always have the possibilities to close it during nighttime. When you look at the formal railway track, those are always also the things that we are looking at to keep it safe by opening it in daytime and closing it at nighttime. So it's a different approach to maintenance, and we're just starting the dialogue with the maintenance department of the city, because they do see those challenges. But the difficulties that we mostly face is within the legislation from fire department, etc., to keep it safe in general.
Thank you, everyone. I just have one other question before we close the discussion. You've been working with the municipality for 15 years, and probably there are various rates at which these interventions gets adopted. So what's been your experience? You did talk about a lot of these cool roof measures and also these water retention structures. What is the timeline in convincing the municipal authorities, also getting the stakeholder buy-in?
Well, what we were aiming for when we started the Green Roofs program in 2008, it was a very technical approach. And basically what we were addressing is the possibility of the subsidy that we offered to install green roofs on the houses, because it enabled us to increase the water storage capacity on top of roofs. And the citizens in Rotterdam really did not like that message, because a roof is above your head to keep you dry. And we were asking them to invest effort, financial, to increase the risk. That's how they felt it. So at some point we decided to create a demonstration roof. And we started to invite the people of Rotterdam to see with our own eyes what the possibilities on the roof are. And since 2015, we have the event, the Rotterdam Roofscape event, and amount of visitors increased from 2010 to 2018 from about 45 people in a whole afternoon. The demonstration roof that we organized as a municipality to 20 and 30,000 visitors in one weekend, because the event, the cultural event, made it fun. And in the year's time, what we were aiming for is to show the possibilities that the space on roofs have, and to trigger people to come up with things that they can place on the roof. So it's not just one function, not one size fits all, but to keep it flexible, and to assist with hands-on information in the how-to. And that is why the program that we have made has got so many soft skill solutions, because it is mostly about enticing the people to help us face the challenges together. And best way to do it is to make it attractive. And that is why we are so happy that an architect firm like MVRDV, who can design attractive buildings, helped us to come up with the catalog, because it is a bridge from the practical information and the solutions towards the how to help people really create the solutions that the city needs, and hopefully the whole world can benefit from too.
Thank you very much. I think that's the message we want to leave the audience with. Work together to make things happen for the city and also for the region, and eventually for the world at large. So thank you very much. I once again thank all the panelists, Dr. Lavlesh, Dr. Dutt, and Mr. Rajendran and Ms. Evelyn, for taking us through some of the wonderful efforts which are being carried out both in India and in Rotterdam. And I also would like to thank MCCI and the UN Habitat and NIUA for organizing this wonderful session. Over to you, Ms. Saraswati.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mahesh. I should extend a special thanks to you. You have been a support always, and today too. Thank you so much for beautifully moderating the session, and it's very informative. So thank you very much. Thanks all the participants for your patient listening, and we have another 2 interesting technical sessions tomorrow. Please do join us. My colleagues have sent a fresh link to you. No need to register. Just like that, you can join now tomorrow at 2:45. We expect you to be there. Thanks once again, everyone. Have a safe day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.